The church bells tolled like a heartbeat breaking, their echo mingling with the soft sobs of mourners as my father's casket gleamed under the stained glass light. I stood frozen, clutching my mother's trembling hand, the weight of his absence crushing us both. Then I saw him, my brother-in-law, Greg, smirking in the back pew, his eyes glinting with something other than grief. It was the day of Dad's funeral, and the air was thick with sorrow and unspoken tensions. My father, Richard Harper, had been the anchor of our family, a man who built a construction empire from nothing, his calloused hands and stubborn heart shaping a legacy worth millions. At 62, he was supposed to have decades left, but cancer doesn't negotiate. Mom, Ellen, was a shadow of herself, her silver hair framing a face etched with loss. My sister, Clara, clung to Greg, her husband of 10 years, as if he were her lifeline. But I knew better. Greg's presence always felt like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I'm Lily, 35, the younger daughter who never left home, not out of duty, but because Dad and I shared a bond forged in late-night talks and shared dreams of keeping Harper Construction alive. Clara, 5 years older, had always been the dreamer, chasing art and freedom, leaving the family business to me. Greg, though, was the outsider who slithered into our lives when Clara fell for his charm. He was 40, slick-talking, with a salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. I never trusted him, but Clara swore he was her everything. As the funeral ended, mourners shuffled out, leaving whispers of condolence in their wake. Greg approached Mom and me, his suit too crisp for a man in mourning. "Ellen, Lily," he said, voice smooth as oil. "We need to talk about Richard's will. Soon." His words hit like a slap. Dad wasn't even in the ground yet, and Greg was already circling like a vulture. That night, at Mom's house, the tension boiled over. Clara, Greg, Mom, and I sat around the oak dining table, the same one where Dad used to carve Thanksgiving turkeys. Greg pulled out a document, its edges crisp, the ink too fresh. "Richard left me in charge of the estate," he said, sliding it toward Mom. "He wanted me to handle the $5 million trust." My stomach churned. Dad would never entrust Greg with a dime, let alone millions. Mom's eyes widened, her hands shaking as she scanned the paper. Clara nodded, her face pale but trusting. "He's right, Mom. Dad told me Greg would take care of us." I snatched the document, my heart pounding. The signature at the bottom looked like Dad's, but something was off. The loops too tight, the slant too perfect. "This is fake," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Greg's smile faltered, just for a second. "Lily, you're grieving. You're not thinking straight." But I was. I'd seen Dad's signature on every contract since I was 15, working summers at Harper Construction. This wasn't it. The next morning, I drove to Dad's office, my hands gripping the steering wheel as anger and suspicion churned. The office was a shrine to him, blueprints pinned to the walls, his old hard hat on the desk. I rifled through his files, searching for the real will. Hours later, buried in a locked drawer, I found it. A worn envelope, Dad's handwriting scrawled across it. Inside was his true will, naming Mom and me as executors, with the $5 million trust split equally between Clara and me for the family business. Greg's name was nowhere. I called Mom, my voice shaking with relief and rage. "We need a lawyer. Now." She hesitated, her loyalty to Clara warring with the truth. "Lily, if this is real, it'll destroy your sister." But I wasn't backing down. Greg had crossed a line, and I'd make sure he paid for it. By noon, I was at the office of Sarah Klein, Dad's attorney for 20 years. Her sharp eyes scanned the two documents, the forged one Greg presented and the real one from Dad's drawer. "This is fraud," she said, her voice calm but deadly. "We'll need a forensic expert to prove it, but this could land Greg in serious trouble." My heart raced. This wasn't just about money. It was about Dad's legacy, about protecting what he'd built. As I left Sarah's office, my phone buzzed. It was Clara, her voice frantic. "Lily, why are you doing this? Greg says you're trying to tear us apart." I clenched my jaw, torn between love for my sister and the truth. "Clara, come to Mom's tonight. You need to see something." I hung up, my chest tight. The fight was just beginning, and I wasn't sure our family could survive it. That evening, Mom's living room felt like a battlefield. Clara sat beside Greg, her eyes red from crying. Greg's arm was around her, possessive, his face a mask of concern. I laid out both wills, the real and the fake, and watched Clara's face crumple as Sarah explained the discrepancies. "The signature's a forgery," Sarah said. "We're taking this to court." Greg's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, his eyes darting to Clara. Clara sobbed, turning to Greg. "Tell me it's not true." He stammered, his charm cracking. "Babe, I was just trying to protect you." But the lie was flimsy, and Clara's trust began to fracture. Mom reached for her hand, but Clara pulled away, storming out. Greg followed, shooting me a look that promised revenge. I sank into a chair, exhaustion and guilt washing over me. Had I just lost my sister? But as Mom squeezed my shoulder, her voice steady, I knew we were doing the right thing. Dad's legacy wasn't just money. It was the love and trust he'd poured into us. Greg thought he could steal it, but I'd fight with everything I had to prove him wrong. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a sterile backdrop to the chaos tearing my family apart. I sat beside Mom, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Clara avoided my gaze from across the aisle, Greg's arm still around her. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, peered over her glasses at the forged will, her silence amplifying the tension. Sarah Klein stood, her voice steady as she presented our case. "Your Honor, the document presented by Gregory Vaughn is a clear forgery, an attempt to defraud the Harper estate of $5 million. She laid out the evidence, the real will, Dad's meticulous records, and a forensic report confirming the signature was fake. I watched Greg's face, expecting panic, but he sat smug, whispering to Clara as if this were a minor inconvenience. Clara's belief in Greg was a knife in my heart. Growing up, she'd been my protector, the one who braided my hair and taught me how to stand up to bullies. Now, she saw me as the enemy, her loyalty twisted by Greg's lies. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she saw the truth, but I stayed silent, trusting Sarah to unravel Greg's scheme. The forensic expert, Dr. Patel, took the stand, explaining how the ink on Greg's document was less than a month old, while Dad's reel will bore the weathered marks of years. "The signature angles don't match Richard Harper's known handwriting," she said, projecting magnified images for the court. Whispers rippled through the room, but Greg's confidence didn't waver. What was he hiding? During a recess, I cornered Clara in the hallway. "You have to listen," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Dad would never give Greg control. You know that." Her eyes, so like Dad's, flickered with doubt, but she shook her head. "You're wrong, Lily. Greg's been there for me when you were too busy with the company." Her words stung, but I saw the crack in her armor. She wasn't ready to let go, but she was starting to question. Back in court, Greg's lawyer, a slick man named Carter, called a surprise witness, Dad's old accountant, Mr. Hensley. My stomach dropped. Hensley, frail and nervous, claimed Dad had discussed changing his will to favor Greg. "Richard said he trusted Greg to lead the family," he mumbled. I gripped Mom's hand, fury rising. Hensley had retired years ago. Dad barely mentioned him. This was a setup. Sarah cross-examined, her questions sharp. "When did Richard allegedly say this, Mr. Hensley?" He stammered, unable to pinpoint a date. "And where's the documentation?" she pressed. Hensley's silence was damning. The judge's frown deepened, and I felt a spark of hope. Greg's lies were crumbling, but he still sat there, unshaken, as if he had another card to play. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying Hensley's testimony. Why would he lie? I dug into Dad's old emails, searching for clues. Deep in a folder, I found a thread between Dad and Hensley from 2 years ago, discussing a loan Hensley begged for. Dad had refused. Was this Greg's leverage? I forwarded the emails to Sarah, my pulse racing. If Greg was blackmailing Hensley, we could turn this around. The next day, Sarah recalled Hensley, confronting him with the emails. His face paled as he admitted Greg had helped him with debts in exchange for his testimony. The courtroom buzzed, and Clara's head snapped toward Greg, her eyes wide with betrayal. For the first time, I saw her doubt him fully. Greg's smug mask slipped, replaced by a flash of fear. The judge adjourned for the day, and I approached Clara outside. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said softly. "I'm doing it for Dad. For us." She didn't respond, but her silence wasn't hostile. It was heavy with realization. As Greg pulled her away, I knew the tide was turning. But the fight wasn't over. Greg was cornered, and a desperate man is a dangerous one. Rain streaked the courthouse windows, mirroring the storm in my heart as we returned for the next hearing. Clara sat alone this time, Greg's absence a glaring void. She looked smaller, her shoulders hunched, as if the weight of truth was finally settling. I wanted to reach for her, but the chasm between us felt too wide. Sarah had uncovered more. Greg had been funneling money from Harper Construction's accounts for months, small enough amounts to go unnoticed, but totaling nearly $200,000. He used fake invoices, Sarah whispered to me before court. "We've got him." My anger flared, but so did my fear. Clara would be devastated when this came out. The judge called Greg to the stand. He strode up, his confidence fraying but still intact, his eyes avoiding Clara's. Sarah didn't hold back. "Mr. Vaughn, can you explain these transactions?" She projected bank records, each one a nail in Greg's coffin. He claimed they were business expenses, but his voice shook and the judge's eyes narrowed. Clara's gasp echoed in the quiet courtroom. I turned to see her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming. She'd trusted Greg with everything, her heart, her future, and he'd betrayed her in ways I hadn't imagined. I slid closer, risking rejection, and whispered, "I'm here, Clara." She didn't pull away, but her silence screamed pain. Sarah pressed harder, revealing Greg's connection to a shady offshore account. "You planned to siphon the $5 million, didn't you?" she asked. Greg's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled, her patience thin. Greg stammered, his lies unraveling like cheap thread. The courtroom felt electric, every eye on him as he squirmed. Then came the bombshell. Sarah produced a recording, obtained legally from Dad's office security system. In it, Greg was caught pressuring Hensley to lie, promising to make it worth his while. The judge's gavel silenced the room's gasps. Greg's face drained of color, and Clara buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I reached for her, and this time, she let me hold her. The hearing ended with Greg's lawyer scrambling, requesting a recess to regroup. The judge granted it, but her expression said she'd seen enough. Outside, Clara clung to me, her voice raw. How could I be so blind? I didn't have answers, only love. "We'll get through this," I promised, though I wasn't sure how. That night, Mom, Clara, and I sat together. The first time in weeks we felt like a family. Clara apologized, her words choked with guilt. "I should have listened to you, Lily." Mom hugged her, tears in her eyes. "We're Harpers," she said. "We don't break." But I knew Greg wasn't done. He'd fight dirty, and I had to be ready. I spent hours combing through Dad's financial records, piecing together Greg's scheme. He'd been skimming profits for years, using Clara's trust to cover his tracks. The betrayal cut deeper than the money. It was the violation of Dad's legacy, the empire he'd built for us. I vowed to protect it, no matter the cost. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation as the final hearing loomed. Greg had hired a new lawyer, a shark named Reynolds, whose reputation for twisting truth made my skin crawl. Clara sat with Mom and me now, her face pale but resolute. She'd moved out of her house with Greg, staying with Mom, a small victory in our fractured family. Reynolds opened with a bold move, claiming Dad had been mentally unfit when he wrote the Real will, painting Greg as a victim of circumstance. My blood boiled. Dad was sharp until his final days, his mind a steel trap despite his body's betrayal. Sarah countered with medical records and testimonials from Dad's colleagues, proving his clarity. Reynolds' argument crumbled, but he wasn't done. He called a new witness, a woman named Vanessa, who claimed to be Dad's confidant in his final months. She was in her late 30s, polished and poised, claiming Dad had confided plans to give Greg control. My heart sank. Another lie, but a convincing one. Clara stiffened beside me, her trust shaken again. I whispered, "She's lying," but doubt lingered in her eyes. Sarah cross-examined, digging into Vanessa's background. It didn't take long to unravel. Vanessa was Greg's cousin, a fact she'd hidden. The judge's scowl deepened as Sarah exposed their connection, and Vanessa's story fell apart. Clara exhaled, squeezing my hand. "I'm so sorry I doubted you," she whispered. I nodded, relief flooding me, but Greg's desperation was growing. That afternoon, Sarah dropped another bomb. Greg had tried to transfer $1 million to an offshore account the day before. The bank flagged it, and Sarah had the records. "He's planning to flee," she told the judge, presenting the evidence. Greg's lawyer scrambled, claiming it was a mistake, but the judge wasn't buying it. She ordered Greg's passport seized, and his face went ashen. Outside, Clara broke down, her anger turning to grief. "I loved him, Lily. How could he do this?" I held her, my own tears falling. "Some people only love what they can take," I said. Mom joined us, her strength anchoring us both. We were battered, but we were together. That night, I found a letter in Dad's office, tucked in his desk. It was addressed to Clara and me, written in his final weeks. "My girls," it began, "trust each other, no matter what. The company is yours, but family is your legacy." I cried, reading it to Clara and Mom. It was as if Dad were there, guiding us through the storm. The next day, I met with Sarah to plan our final move. Greg's lies were exposed, but he'd try one last play. I wasn't just fighting for the money. I was fighting for Dad's name, for the love that held us together. And I'd make sure Greg regretted ever crossing us. The courtroom felt like the eye of a hurricane, quiet but charged with impending chaos. Greg sat alone, his new lawyer whispering frantically as the judge reviewed the mounting evidence. Clara's hand trembled in mine. Her faith in Greg shattered, but her heart still raw. I squeezed her hand, silently promising we'd see this through. Sarah presented the bank records, showing Greg's attempted $1 million transfer. "This wasn't a mistake," she said, her voice cutting. "It was a calculated move to steal from the Harper estate." The judge's eyes locked on Greg, who shifted uncomfortably, his charm gone. Reynolds tried to spin it, claiming Greg was securing funds for Clara, but the lie was laughable. Then came the final blow. Sarah called a forensic accountant who'd traced Greg's offshore account to a shell company he'd set up years ago. "He's been planning this since he married into the family," the accountant said, displaying a web of transactions linking Greg to the stolen $200,000. The courtroom gasped, and Clara's sob broke the silence. I held her tighter, my own anger simmering. Greg took the stand, his voice desperate now. "I was protecting Clara's future," he insisted, but his eyes darted, betraying him. Sarah didn't let up. "You forged a will, blackmailed a witness, and stole from the company. What part of that is protection?" Greg had no answer, his lies exposed like bones in a desert. The judge adjourned for deliberation, and we waited in the hallway, the weight of the moment suffocating. Clara leaned against me, her voice small. "I feel like such a fool." I shook my head. "You loved him. That's not foolish, it's human." Mom joined us, her presence a quiet strength. "Your father would be proud of you both," she said, and I believed her. Hours later, the judge returned. Her verdict was swift. The forged will was invalid, Greg's claims were dismissed, and he faced charges for fraud and embezzlement. The $5 million trust was restored to Clara and me, as Dad intended. Greg's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with defeat. Clara didn't look at him. She looked at me, her eyes full of gratitude and pain. Outside, reporters swarmed, but we slipped away, needing space to heal. At Mom's house, we sat in silence, the weight of victory bittersweet. Clara spoke first. "I don't know how to start over," she admitted. I took her hand. "Together. That's how." Mom nodded, her eyes shining. "We're Harpers. We rebuild." That night, I dreamed of Dad, his laugh echoing as he handed me a blueprint. "Keep building, Lily," he said. I woke with tears in my eyes, but a fire in my heart. Greg had tried to tear us apart, but he'd only made us stronger. The aftermath of the trial was a quiet reckoning. Clara moved back into Mom's house permanently, her marriage to Greg over in all but name. Divorce papers were filed, and Greg, facing criminal charges, disappeared from our lives, his bail hearing pending. The $5 million was safe, but the scars he left ran deep. I threw myself into Harper Construction, determined to honor Dad's legacy. The office felt alive again, workers rallying behind me as we took on new projects. Clara joined me, hesitant at first, her artist's hands learning the ropes of the business she'd once ignored. "I want to make Dad proud," she said one day, her voice steady. I smiled, seeing the sister I'd missed for so long. But Greg's shadow lingered. A week after the trial, I got a call from Sarah. "Greg's trying to cut a deal," she said. "He's claiming he has information on other frauds in the industry." My stomach twisted. Was he dragging others down to save himself? I told Sarah to keep us posted, but I didn't trust Greg to tell the truth, even now. Clara struggled most. She'd loved Greg fiercely, and his betrayal left her questioning herself. One evening, as we sorted through Dad's old files, she broke down. "I gave him everything, Lily. How do I trust again?" I hugged her, my own heart aching. "You trust us," I said. "And you trust yourself. You're stronger than you know." We started therapy together, Clara, Mom, and me, working through the pain and rebuilding our bond. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, helped Clara see that Greg's actions weren't her fault. Slowly, Clara's spark returned, her laughter filling Mom's house again. I saw Dad in her smile, and it gave me hope. Harper Construction thrived, the $5 million trust fueling new projects and community outreach Dad would have loved. We named a scholarship after him, helping young builders chase their dreams. Every contract I signed felt like a promise to him, a vow to keep his legacy alive. As winter turned to spring, I felt the weight of the past year lift. Greg's trial loomed, but it no longer defined us. We were moving forward, together, stronger than ever. Dad's love had carried us through, and I knew he'd be proud. Spring brought new beginnings, the air crisp with possibility as Clara and I stood outside Harper Construction's newest site, a community center Dad had dreamed of building. The groundbreaking ceremony was small, just us, Mom, and a few loyal employees, but it felt monumental. Clara held the shovel, her smile bright, a far cry from the broken woman of months ago. Greg's trial came and went, a quiet epilogue to our saga. He pleaded guilty to lesser charges, trading information for a reduced sentence. 3 years in prison, a small price for the chaos he'd caused, but it was closure. Clara didn't attend. She said she'd already said goodbye to him in her heart. I was proud of her strength. The community center became our focus, a symbol of healing. Clara designed a mural for the entrance, vibrant colors telling the story of our town, of Dad's legacy. I watched her paint, her hands steady, and felt a surge of love. "You're back," I said. She laughed, paint on her cheek. "I never left. I just got lost for a while." Mom took up gardening again, her backyard blooming with roses Dad had loved. She'd sit there in the evenings, talking to him as if he were beside her. I joined her sometimes, sharing stories of the company, of Clara's growth. "He's listening," Mom would say, and I'd nod, feeling him in the breeze. One day, Clara found a letter from Dad, tucked in an old sketchbook. It was to her, written when she married Greg. "Choose love, but choose wisely," he'd written. "You're my dreamer, Clara, but you're also a Harper. You're unstoppable." She cried, but they were healing tears. She framed the letter, hanging it in her new apartment, a reminder of her strength. Harper Construction grew, not just in profit but in impact. We hired local kids, mentored them, gave them the chances Dad had given others. The $5 million trust was more than money. It was a promise to keep building, not just structures, but lives. Clara and I ran it together, our bond stronger than ever. As I stood at the community center's opening, watching kids play in the courtyard Clara had designed, I felt Dad's presence. The pain of the past year hadn't broken us. It had forged us. Greg thought he could destroy us, but he'd underestimated the Harpers. I laughed, not with cruelty but with triumph, knowing the truth had set us free. We were a family again, bound by love, loss, and an unbreakable legacy. And as the sun set over the center, I whispered to Dad, "We did it." Somewhere, I knew he was smiling.